All right, so what we're going to talk about is stacking. What is stacking? How do we do it? What are you looking for? So I got my partner Rick today who's going to help me out on what we're going to do. When I first started playing pickleball, it's about 6 years ago. Ugh, makes me kind of date myself a little bit. Stacking wasn't used very commonly. Rick, you've been playing a long time, right? 8 years. So back then, was stacking used as much as it is now? Definitely a different game. And a lot of it is the times that I'd see more stacking was a lefty righty situation. Now it's an every level kind of thing, in my opinion. A lot of people will say, "Oh, I'm not good enough to do that." It's a skill, like everything. It's another tool that you have in your belt. But especially understanding stacking is key when your opponents are stacking. You don't want to freak out about it and not know how to deal with it. So knowing what you're looking for, knowing what you're doing is key. So stacking is essentially, if I'm playing, let's say women's doubles, I primarily play on the left side of the court. And we do that often when we put we say the power shot in the middle, often the forehand situation. So that's why we kind of stack that way. So also for those of you who are like, well, I want to really take my backhand right here. There is a reason that we stack with the forehand and the center because it creates the most dominant position. So when you are in your position, especially if I'm on this side of the court, the expectation is you are taking more balls. And our positioning is key, mind you, when we're up here. So if I'm on this half and my paddle say over here, I'm really not doing my job by covering the middle. So that's why that paddle position is out here and forward. So I'm really close to the middle and I see that ball. I'm just looking for that. So that is a huge factor in why we have certain grips. So I see a lot of players struggle being offensive in the middle when they have like a grip like this or they're tilted sideways because we just don't see the ball. So remember, if you are on the forehand dominant side, it's not about like, oh, I don't. Rick's got a great backhand. Doesn't mean that he necessarily should be taking all of that. It's all about the situational, what's best for your team. If it were reversed, I'd be making Rick take that forehand. I'm totally fine with that. Now, it's not a 100% all the time, but there is reasoning behind that. It's easier to keep the ball in front of us. You've got more options on that forehand side, especially with most players out there. So that's a big factor right there. Okay, it's easier to poach with your forehand than it is for your backhand for a lot of people. So, we kind of go the whys and why nots. Now, the other spectrum of stacking is not just always about creating that dominant space in the middle. It's often a strategy standpoint. So you'll see when you watch us play as pros, you'll see us sometimes switch our stacking where it's not always the same. And sometimes it is, two players are kind of going at it a little bit more. And I feel like I can do better against this person in a down the line versus a backhand. So maybe that's why we switch our stacking to pull the positions and change it up. So again, it's not one size fits all, but we do have options. So let's first start with serving stacking because that is definitely the easiest. And very often it's the best way to start to learn to stack because it's a shorter distance. So if we are playing, okay, and we are stacking with me on this side, okay, and I have to serve here, well, I'm going to serve and then move over, and my partner will now take the position. And it would be the opposite for Rick. If he's going to come over and serve here, he will serve, slide over, and I will move in. Not a big deal. It's fairly simple. For a lot of seniors or players that have kind of trouble with mobility, don't feel like they're as fast, they often call a half stack. They stack on the serve, but not necessarily on the return. We kind of say defense versus offense. But now what we're looking at is kind of two simple things. So let's switch sides. So we're now looking to a return situation. So one of the classic ways to stack is on the side, but what you're seeing a lot of us do is what we call a signal. So if Rick's up here at the non-volley line, I'm returning. What I'm looking for is a signal from Rick, okay? So he's going to give me, and he's going to turn around. He's showing me the signal. He's now going to show you the signal. That means we're going to switch, okay? So what's really important is as a partner, he's going to keep that hand there until I say, yes, I got it, okay, or something like that, okay? It's you've got to make sure that you're acknowledging your partner when you're doing that. Now, show him the signal for stay. Now it's a closed fist, okay? So if he has that closed fist and I go to return and say, okay, I'm going to return the ball and go straight to my direction, okay? Now, if he shows me the cross, okay, what's actually important on this and what you'll see very often is where I return the ball. So if I hit a weak return cross court or down the middle, it may be easier for our opponents to pass us down the middle or on the outside. So on average, I'm going to return deep down the line. Getting to know that deep down the line is ideal. It's going to give them a more difficult angle to hit past and behind. Okay. And also keep the ball in front. So I'm going to hit that return down the line, and then we're going to, as I'm coming, switch positions as we come forward. Okay. So what's important about that is not rushing. The biggest mistake I see when people are stacking is they're so focused on, I got to get all the way across the court, that they end up missing the return. So you always want to think, hit a good return first before you move on. Okay, now we're going to do kind of what we call an old school stack. You do see it, but it's a little bit easier for most people. So Rick's going to stay on the side now. Okay. Now, the reason that at higher levels we do the switch more is because we don't always show them what we're doing. Sometimes we may stay and sometimes we may go. So, what we're doing is making it more difficult for our opponents to recognize what we're doing. Whereas if they see Rick here, they pretty much know I'm going to return it and then go here, and then Rick will just slide into the court. There's nothing wrong with that. And honestly, for most levels, this is the way that you want to go. This is easier to hit a return that's not as good. You can create more error. Whereas if we're switching, if you don't hit a good enough return, very often players get passed down the middle and they're not covering that space. So I think when you're learning to stack, this is a really good way to do it so that you just work on the space. It's a much shorter distance. All you're doing is stepping into the court, and I'm going around here. Okay. So when doing these, it's just recognizing how you want to do it. Sometimes with my partners, we'll mix it up a little bit. Sometimes we'll stack from that direction, and sometimes we will signal. It is more common now that you see the signal because at our level, we're not always doing the same thing. But if you and your partner are always stacking the same position, then it might be easier for you to start with the side stack and easier to go. Something that I get asked a lot, if you start stacking, do you have to always stack? Now, Rick is a referee, correct? Refs a lot of matches. How important it is, just from a rule standpoint, let's say this. What are you looking for when you see teams stacking? Okay. And what happens a lot is we get out of position all the time if you're not comfortable with stacking. Now, from a certified referee's mouth, not certified, almost made me really sad, but Nicole, the wife, is. So, and if I start stacking, do I have to stack the whole time? Absolutely not. So you can do whatever you want. You can stack as much as you want. But very often, if you are in tournament play and if a referee knows you're stacking, they are paying extra close attention to the positioning. Everybody makes the mistakes every so often. So legally, if I am in a tournament, I can ask Rick as my referee, and I'm pretty sure he has refed a few of my matches. I can say, hey, ref or Rick. Okay. Ideally, I want to be nice when I'm asking them this question because sometimes I've seen a couple people snap at a referee. I can say, am I in the correct position now as of January 1st? But a very simple thing to say is, am I the correct returner, receiver, or am I the correct server? It's a really quick way to do it, and you just want to get to know what your score is. So it is important to recognize when you're consistently stacking as you're learning where you should be. And this is why we know even and odd is an important way to look at the sides of the net. So if you're learning to stack, this is a big reason why we say even and odd, because if Rick and I start our match, okay, and we are starting on the even side for Rick and the odd side for me, that means every time our score is even, these are the sides that we're on. Every time the score is odd, we are on opposite sides. Okay. That means I have to return or serve from that situation. It's why we have serving bans, because it makes it easier for a referee to know whose side is whose. Okay, so really, really important rule that a lot of people don't realize. I had a friend of mine that got caught in this recently. Okay, the first game they started with one person starting the serve, so they had the serving band. The second game, legally, we can change the server. You need to tell the referee so that your opponents also know, and you can switch the serving band. If you do not tell them, they will call a fault on you. Okay, so recognizing this is where it is, so that band is there for a reason. We've got to use it for a reason. Now, if my opponents are stacking, try not to stress about it too much. Stick with your decisions. Often, what I see people do is when they have an idea of where they want to hit a ball, and then they see their opponents are switching and they change their mind. Stick with the shots that you want. Okay. So if Rick's over here, okay, and I'm serving, okay, well, obviously, a good return might be to return it over here and make me move a little bit farther. Okay, and vice versa with Rick. If Rick's over here, then returning deep down the line is moving them a little bit out of position. It's a smart shot to hit. If I see players that are not communicating very well and they're stacking, a middle return might be great because they may not realize whose ball is who. That's a mistake that I see a lot of players make, is Rick is sliding over and the ball goes down the middle and now no one knows whose ball. So calling that ball, communicating when you're stacking is extremely, extremely important. Okay. I often hear people saying, oh, you always have to go back to the server on a return or something like that. That is not true. Think about the angles of the court that you are using more than anything. Now, if we are switching, if we decide to go from here, okay, Rick returns it, and then I switch, okay, think about what your best shots may be. Okay. And often, again, the more experience players have, they are better at covering that middle space. The less experience people have when they're stacking, that middle is often open. So if Rick doesn't hit a great ball, maybe hitting it and driving it down the middle while we're crossing, that would be a great thing to do. I always think rely on the shots that you and your partner have already decided where you are dropping the ball or driving the ball, but keep consistent. Like I said, make your choices first. Try not to change because suddenly they moved out of position. But it is okay to change your mind. So if you suddenly see your opponent start to stack and they weren't before, hey, well, now they might be gaining a little bit momentum. So what you have to decide on your end is, as a team, what can we do differently to deal with the stack, and why did they start stacking in that way? I often see people trying to stack because one person's trying to get more involved, okay, and they weren't before. So maybe trying to go behind the person that is trying to be more aggressive is a great idea, but you're always communicating and thinking about these things as a topic. One of the most basic reasons that we're going to switch stacking is if we're on the return and our opponents are on a run, they've hit a few and we are stacking, but we're still not getting anywhere. Maybe that's why we decide to switch our stacking, just to give them a different look. And sometimes that does kind of give you a little momentum. You're always looking for the ability to evaluate in a match how you and your partner are doing and if you need to change any of your behavior. But as always, stacking takes practice. So learning to communicate, making sure you know what your partners are doing. Probably some of the best advice I can give you is, if Rick gives me a go signal and he forgets to go, and we get a little confused, not a big deal. I'm not going to punish Rick or get mad at Rick as my partner. We're just going to move on and get on to the next one. What happens a lot, people get flustered and they get frustrated. So it's okay. You make a mistake, you lose a point. It's okay. Move on. Keep working at it. Don't give up on it.